I think it's time to start. And I will start by thanking everyone for attending. In case you don't know me, my name is Anne Marie Smith, and I am the executive editor of datamanagementu.com. We provide a resource portal for all areas of enterprise data management. We have hundreds of articles. We have webinars, we have videos, we have white papers, all of them designed to help professionals in any area of enterprise data management improve their knowledge, their skill sets, and to form a community. I'd like to thank our primary sponsor, EW Solutions, for today's webinar. Let's talk about what we're going to do. And before that, we'll go through some housekeeping points. We have a poll. David, if you would launch the poll, thank you so much. The organization manages business and technical metadata. How does your organization do that? As you are settling in, please choose the answer to the poll that most closely conforms to your organization's situation. Let me say that without stumbling. Please choose the answer in the poll that most closely conforms to your organization's situation concerning metadata management. We will look at the answers to the poll later in our broadcast. If you have a question, please post your question in Q&A. Please don't post it in the chat because we will answer questions differently than we will respond to chat. Since you're here, you're probably interested in metadata management, enterprise data management, data governance, data security, etc. Well, we have a facility where you can take online on-demand training in so many areas. It's called datamanagementeducation.com. The URL is right here on the screen. I suggest that you visit it and figure out which course or courses are best for you. If you are a LinkedIn member, we welcome you as a follower for Data Management U. Since you probably love our webinars, you want to watch them over and over. We're on YouTube at the EW Solutions channel. Right now, we're live streaming this webinar, but the webinar is recorded. And sometime tomorrow, the webinar will be on the EW Solutions channel, so that if you missed anything, you can follow it there. If you want a copy of the PowerPoint David will use in today's presentation, go to ewsolutions.com/data management webinars, and PowerPoints of all of our presentations are there. Finally, if you stay for the entire hour, you will receive a certificate that shows you've earned 1 professional development unit for this hour. You'll receive it within a week to 10 days, not 10 minutes from the end of this session, and you must attend the entire webinar.
Do not ask us for that certificate early. We will find you.
And we will send it when the time is ready.
Yes.
Okay. What's our next point? Our next point, and for some reason my mouse isn't working. There it is. I'd like to thank all our sponsors and all our partner organizations. We have IIM Africa, which is not just in Africa, although since that's where it started, that's the name. It's an international association for information management professionals. We have IDMA. Oh yes, huge is right. We have IDMA, which is about the insurance data management field.
Anne-Marie, may I jump in? They are the premier professional organization in insurance data management.
Absolutely, they are.
They're a great group of people. We've known Farouk and Katie and all the wonderful people there, like I am, for years.
And IABC, which is the premier workers' comp organization. Wonderful people.
Can I jump in again?
Of course you can.
They're another. So when we talk about these are free organizations. They're professional organizations. They may have some fees, but they're really minimal. If you're in workers' compensation, you need to go to their website, join up. Great group, great people. They've been doing this for a long time. They're not new in data management. So another really great group.
I've already thanked one of our sponsors, EW Solutions. I'd like to thank our other two sponsors, Octopi and OneTrust. Each one of them plays a role in both enterprise data management and, believe it or not, metadata management.
Yes,
So
they
if you're
do.
interested in learning more, please visit octopi.com and onetrust.com. Both of them are fine organizations. Of course, we think they're fine. They're sponsors, but they're fine even if they weren't our sponsors. Okay, what are we going to learn today? Well, we've got a lot to cover in a very short period of time. David will walk us through the overview of metadata management, the foundational concepts that everyone needs to know. We'll look at something many organizations don't consider at the moment, and they should, the value of a metadata strategy and the importance of having a methodology for defining metadata requirements and for implementing them. We'll look at the benefits of capturing and integrating metadata, which is so important in today's world where we collect data from so many various sources. And we'll look at the metadata repository briefly. I'd like to thank our presenter, David Marco. David, why don't you take over?
Excellent. This is a topic I'm very excited about. Let me end the polling and let's look at our results. So, I wrote the first answer to this one. How does your organization manage business and technical metadata? And we see 17% say, what is metadata? So very fair response. I think what's interesting here though is the top response at 34%, that's about a third, is we have some business metadata for certain key terms, but we do not manage it like we manage our technical metadata. I would guess out of these 34%, these are organizations that have invested in data lineage type technology, really focused on the metadata side, but probably haven't fully tied in to their data governance programs. I think the number here that surprises me a bit is 20% have said, hey, we do have a strategy for metadata management. We're covering business and technical metadata. We have consistent processes and policies. These are organizations really doing it well. I'm sorry, let me share the results. So fascinating feedback from our group. Anne-Marie, any comments on this before I dive into the slide deck?
I'm surprised, David, that 34% have some business metadata identified for certain key business terms, but don't manage it like we manage the technical metadata.
So that surprised me as well, because when you look at what companies are asking about, everyone's talking about data governance. And we do see metadata is starting to get back to where it was in the marketplace, but that does surprise me a little bit. I would have thought that it would have been a little bit more similar to the opposite of that question, which is, hey, we manage a little more business metadata than we do technical. But that could also be part of the title of this webinar and the kind of people who are really interested in metadata management.
That's true.
Well, fascinating survey. I have so much to go through, so I'm going to shut it down. And Anne-Marie, can you see my slides nice and large?
Yes, I can. Metadata Management Fundamentals by Dr. David Marco.
Oh my gosh, that's such a big title. I feel the weight of it every moment. So metadata management fundamentals. So a little bit of a background. As most of you know, we've been building metadata management solutions since the 90s. We've been blessed enough to win basically every award you can in this area. We've done a ton of work, not only on the commercial side, but the federal side. So whether it's the FBI, the Department of Defense, BP, Costco, Target, whoever you want to name, we have a lot of experience doing this. This is my background slide. You don't need to read through it, but a couple things. One, definitely follow me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of videos and articles there, and I included my email address. If you have a question on your metadata management initiative, please feel free to let me know. All right, what are we going to talk about? Number one, this is a fundamentals course. Let's hit the basic concepts of metadata management, including business and technical metadata, and I'll walk you through some use cases. As Anne-Marie said, as Dr. Smith said, we are streaming live on YouTube. So if you miss something, you can always go back and rewatch it. So let's get into metadata management fundamentals. So let's first define metadata. When we hear the word metadata, the first definition you may discover is metadata is data about data. Well, I remember when I started in this industry and finding that definition, and I thought, okay, great. I was a data warehouse architect. I would build ETL processes, do data warehouse modeling, and I thought, okay, we need a managed metadata component. Metadata is data about data. What does the SQL code look like for data about data? What are we actually doing? And to be honest, I was very confused. So that really helped trigger and foster my career of saying, okay, what role should the managing of metadata play within a corporation or an agency? So let's give a little better definition. Metadata is a type of data that digitally describes the who, what, when, where, how, and why of an organization's data, processes, applications, assets, business concepts, and other things of interest. Let's summarize all that. Metadata is knowledge. It's everything that data isn't. It's all that stuff and critical information around our data. By the way, I see a lot of people putting stuff in chat. Remember, if you have a question, Anne-Marie wants it in the Q&A. She's very strict on this. So do not make that mistake. Anyway, let me continue. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Let me kind of define this a little more. Metadata, here's an example. Metadata would contain the knowledge that maybe a field is called customer name. Maybe it's 40 characters in length, that it exists in systems A, B, and C, and that, hey, those three systems have master data in them. Those are all examples of metadata. Data would be a specific instance of customer name equaling John Doe, Mary Smith, some kind of name. Information is data that's meaningful to a business user, meaning they understand it and they know what to do with it. Let me kind of give an example of this. One of my favorite slides. Anne-Marie, may I pick on you for a moment?
Of course you can, David. Go ahead.
So if I were to go to Anne-Marie, really bright person, knows our business up, down, and around. I say, Anne-Marie, you need to start making some corporate decisions. Here's some data for you. 48, 27, 30. Go make some corporate decisions. Come on, time is money. Money's time. Why can't you make any decisions?
Because you didn't give me any context. I have no idea what those things are.
Yeah, I gave you a bunch of numbers. They could have been scrubbed. They could be clean. They could be accurate. But I only gave you content. What I didn't give you was context, exactly as you said. Now, in fairness, in this example, Anne-Marie has heard me use this example well over 100 times. But this is exactly what we do in our businesses. We roll out a Tableau report or a Power BI report with a bunch of numbers, and outside of a poorly defined column head, we give no context to those numbers to our decision makers. Data, content without context is meaningless. Data without metadata is equally meaningless. If I were to tell Anne-Marie, hey, those are sales figures for your education department in millions over the last 10 years, Anne-Marie would be able to look and say, oh, sales are going up, they're going down. She could actually look and make decisions and realize, wait a minute, something's right or something's wrong, or Yeah, I need to study this a bit more.
I need more data and more metadata.
Exactly, because what you want is information.
Right.
So that you understand, hey, I need to start looking into this deeper. I need a deeper analysis. Or no, things are working exactly as we thought they would based on factors you would know as the vice president of education. This
Exactly.
is, yeah, this is why metadata is so critical in our companies, because most of the time we spit out reports and we hope and pray people understand that data, and typically they don't. All right, here's the big thing to remember. Data indicates the facts, but metadata gives the story. Facts are critical. Without facts, you can't have a story, but metadata is that story. All right, remember, metadata management is all about digitally capturing the who, what, when, where, how, and why of our data. This is vital. You cannot, we've already shared, if you were here for the early part of this webinar where we just kind of chit chat with the audience, you cannot do data governance without metadata management. And if you don't
David,
have the who, what, oh, I'm sorry, Anne Marie, go ahead.
there's a question here directly going to what you're talking about. How can
Hit me.
metadata help to know, for example, why sales are up or down? So I think that this would be the perfect place for you to answer that in this context.
Absolutely. So when you say, oh, are sales up or are they down? So sales on the surface seems like a very easy concept. But first, when you say sales, are we talking about units sold? Or are we talking about dollars sold? Revenue generated, two different things. In addition, what if there were other factors in the marketplace? I'm thinking of, there was a tire company. I don't want to name one because I can't recall who they were, but it was a number of years ago, and they had, Anne-Marie, they had a little bit of a glitch. Their tires, when your car would go above 50 miles an hour, would explode and separate.
Firestone.
Ah, exactly. Which is a great name for it, right? Firestone. Maybe it's a little too specific. So that's a little problem. So something like that, typically the way those industries work, they sell their product to a reseller, like a Jiffy Lube or some type of national like car part store. And their sales may look great, but what they don't show are returned orders in the report you're looking at. And it turns out people are sending those tires back by the hundreds of thousands.
And
Good
they wouldn't
metadata.
show which ones were which auto vendors were returning the tires. Some
Yep.
people might be keeping them because they didn't know about the glitch at the moment. They don't necessarily show which tires were returned because maybe Rock Auto decided to send back every Firestone tire, even though only one model of the tire was at fault.
Or one
They don't,
factory who made that
right,
model. Maybe it was
exactly.
one factory. And that's where, to get to the person's question, it's so important, because all that we just spoke about is metadata. All of it. Are returned orders part of that? Are we talking about sales in units sold, or are we talking about revenues generated? We could have a record-breaking month in sales and units sold, but maybe we had some deep discounting. So really revenues, somewhat unchanged, and profitability may be quite poor. Metadata, context to the content, would give you the deep insight you need. And let's take it a step further. You can't build good analytics. You can't even build below average analytics.
You can't even build good reports.
No. If you don't know the who, what, when, where, how, and why of your data. Anne Marie, we will not name the company, but but they make beautiful products, especially for women. Gorgeous, high-end designer products. And when we're working with them, 3 different people gave us 3 different definitions for product number.
Yes.
Would you agree that's their most basic, fundamental business term?
Exactly.
Their most basic. And we have three different definitions. How are you going to build quality analytics when you can't even define your most basic business term?
And as an example, in that particular organization, they have a product, and
Mm-hmm.
the product has multiple product numbers.
Yep.
Now, they don't have a different product number for their web sales versus their retail stores versus their outlets. That would at least make some level of sense. No, the same exact product,
Mm-hmm.
pattern, color, everything, multiple product numbers for the same product, which really is a crying shame
Well,
because they can't tell you what's what.
and you know, and you know this part of the story, their customers were picking it up. The customers
That's
knew.
right.
And they were starting to say, hey, wait a minute, for the exact same thing, there are two different product numbers. That talk about eroding your brand. Talk about ruining the relationships. It's very interesting. There was a study done by a doctor, I forget her name right now, but it was a great piece of academic study that showed when people are making a buying decision, distrust outweighs trust. That
Yes.
if you're just neutral, then that's your baseline. That if you trust someone, that distrust impacts buying habits more than trust. That if there's a distrust, you're probably not going to buy from that vendor, much more than if you trust them that you would probably buy. Both are important, but distrust outweighs it. When your customers see that you can't even keep your product numbers straight, that's a cellular problem that needs to be resolved. And by the way, you can't do master data. If you don't know the who, what, when, where, how, and why of your data, guess what you do in master data management? You have to have that capability. And you're not going to do it with a spreadsheet. Machine learning and AI, same thing, garbage in, garbage out. How are you going to security and compliance? CCPA 2020, which was a huge piece of legislation for anyone doing business in California, which is essentially almost everyone, radically expanded the definition of PII. If you don't even have your data kept, the fact that a particular data element is PII, that's called metadata. And if we don't have that, how are we going to be in compliance? And I'll share with you, most of you know, right now we have GDPR, which is relevant for anyone doing business in Europe. We have states like California, Texas, Virginia, Nevada, and Arizona and Illinois. If they haven't passed their privacy regulations yet, they're coming they're coming soon. It is a matter of time. I would be stunned if in the next 12 months there isn't a United States version of GDPR. It is not a political party issue. Both parties have GDPR-like bills on the floor right now. So if you want to be compliant with that, you better have world-class metadata management. All right, let me keep going. I could talk forever on compliance. Metadata management. So let's get in some basic concepts. Business metadata and technical metadata. We assumed you knew what that was in our poll question. Let me explain it quickly. When we talk about business metadata creates a semantic layer between our IT systems and our business users. That's what it does. And this is so important because it makes the strategic information in these enterprise systems, like a data warehouse, like a CRM system, like an ERP system, like your big old data lake, so much more valuable. Because what we really want is not just information, but in the military, there's a term, actionable information, meaning I get this information, I know exactly what I want to do. That's what we need, actionable information. We want to limit our incorrect decisions, increase the confidence in our IT systems. There's statistics on this. Business analysts and data analysts traditionally spend 40 to 60% of their time looking for the data that they need as opposed to analyzing it.
David, is that because they don't have the business data definitions, because they don't understand the context of the data that's in their systems? Is that why we have 40 to 60% of that time wasted?
Exactly. And the data scientist is even worse. The data scientist will talk to the business person and they'll want to test a hypothesis, maybe in market basket analysis, that, oh, if we put this product next to this one, we're more likely to sell. And they'll want to test that hypothesis. They can't even figure out where to find the data. And I can give an example of this. This company was not a client of ours, but I still want to give out their name. But huge automotive company, absolutely massive, one of the top 2 or 3 in the world. I actually own one of their vehicles as I speak to you. But anyway, and they make very fine cars. But anyway, they had a situation where a key part was recalled and they had to send rebate checks to their customers. For every customer who owned that car, and these were big money rebate checks, $500-$600, I forget how much they were, and they were sending out thousands and thousands of these. One of the people who got the rebate check was the CFO. One problem: the CFO no longer owned that car. When that happens, the fit hits the sham. That's what happens. When that CFO comes back, I'll let you guys figure that out. It's very complex. When the CFO comes back in the office, it's going to be a bloodbath. So the CIO would become the ex-CIO in that particular instance. And what happened? They didn't have good metadata management. They just said, oh, we have to issue a rebate check. There is no process. It's all done via heroic effort. So even though that's a regular occurrence when you're a car manufacturer, we don't have a way to do it. So we just call up somebody really smart. Hey, Bob, you're an awesome programmer. Can you run some grep commands and write some SQL code and figure out who owns these cars?
Yeah, he could.
Bob's figuring it out on the fly. And that's why the CFO got that rebate check. And that's why the CIO for this company that acronym ended up standing for career is over. Anne-Marie, did you have something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to add the fact that without the right business data definitions organized in a way that data citizens, people who are users, data analysts, business analysts, can understand the data that they have, they'd never be able to answer a question like that. Who are our current customers?
But Anne-Marie, do we need something like that? Like we're just going to democratize our data. So why do we need that?
That's the topic for another webinar, David. But we do need it. We need it for data governance. You can't identify the policies that apply to a particular data set if you don't know the context of that data set. And the context of that data set is much more than, is it in an Oracle database or a DB2 database or a SQL Server database? The context is much more whether the customer name is 40 characters. The business metadata, the reason this was created. Why are we using this?
You're exactly correct. And whether you're doing data governance we're talking what the CDO has on their plate right now. When Anne-Marie's talking about data governance, when I bring up data democratization, this is on the CDO to-do list. You can't have data democratization if nobody understands your data. And that's
so many organizations are talking about digital transformation.
Yep, huge.
And this is one of the foundational essential parts of a digital transformation, is understanding your organization's business and technical metadata and building an environment to manage it, not just for now, but into the future. And I'll shut up.
Your point, though, is excellent. How are we going to progress and digitally transform our company when we don't even know where we're at today?
And metadata gives you that context.
Who, what, when, where, how, and why. And we have to have that, Anne-Marie. So let's look at business metadata in action. So here is a classic dashboard. that you would see at a company. And in this dashboard, we could see, hey, we have terms like EBITDA. Now, whoever built this dashboard assumed that people just know what that means. And I know there's some of you, I bet Anne Marie knows what this term means, but most people do not. I have to admit, it is not a term that I utilize a whole lot in my day-to-day work life, but it actually means earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had a business metadata definition for that term that a business analyst could right click on that field, hit F1, hotkey, or look it up in a data catalog and get that definition? It would help so much. And we see that here, an example of this kind of functionality. Now it shows when it was last updated. It even shows the data steward. This is a great example of business metadata interactive on a report.
And I would submit, David, that every single one of these items could use that business metadata capability. So how do we define gross profit? Is it truly gross? In other words, the money we just took in versus what we paid out? Or are there nuances to what we consider gross profit that a good analyst needs to know? And not every analyst is going to be good enough to know that instinctively.
Anne Marie, you're exactly right. Even very simple terms on here like website visits. Are those unique visits or total visits? I don't know. We don't know by looking at that report. That having business metadata definitions that are built by our data stewards from our data governance program, super important, just like Anne Marie said, vital to be successful.
One thing I would point out, David, is that although we're talking about internal metadata right now, many organizations need to access data and metadata from external sites. So this is even more important to understand the fact that it's not just internal systems, it's the external environment that you're connected to. Very few organizations are truly islands today. Most organizations have some level of connection to data on the outside, and that data on the outside should have the metadata as well so that you understand what's being brought in.
Your point is so seminal, and I hope everybody really took that one to heart. Companies don't live in a vacuum anymore. They interact with government agencies. They have partners in the B2B partners, and especially I mentioned federal agencies. We do a lot of federal work as well as commercial work. Federal agencies have to communicate with one another. It's vital that they do. So this kind of metadata is so important. So Anne Marie, your point is very true.
Yes, it's vital to regulatory reporting. If you do any reports to any external organization, you need metadata for both your internal environment and the data that you're collecting from external sources, because you're going to have to explain that data to your reporting in organizations.
100% true. Now, as we look at these reports, we've talked about business metadata for these different numbers we're looking at. And just keep in mind, up to this point, we're talking about simple numbers. What about complex formulas? That the definitions would be much more complex. You can also, data quality, such an important part of a company's data management journey. So as a data warehouse architect, I can tell you, anytime you're loading a data warehouse, there are records that error out. Unless you're a data architect that loads everything in the data warehouse, and if you are, you're not doing it right. Because some companies do make that mistake of loading all their records in the data warehouse. I would not do that. I never believe in loading bad data. So good ETL processes, extraction, transform, and load. They're gonna error out some records. Wouldn't it be great is when we look at these statistics, if we could, again, right click or hotkey and find out, hey, what percentage of records errored out in here? So you know that the numbers you're looking at could change or be skewed by as much as, in this case, 1.9%. A great example of interactive data quality right in our analytics. All right, here's what's also valuable. Now, I'm not giving a tool talk right now, but to me, I think the tools that are available to us, both for metadata management and data governance, it's never been more exciting than now. We have some strong vendors in the field, and a common piece of functionality that I see, at least out of the elite level companies here, is they actually allow you to, if you open an email, open a Word doc, open an Excel spreadsheet, you can highlight a word and then again, right click, hit F1, hotkey some way, and get a business metadata definition. Boom, have it pop right up on your screen as I'm showing here. Super valuable. To me, it's must-have functionality in a metadata management program because the customers love it. It's a great way to really communicate the meaning and understanding of our data. Talk about raising the data literacy of your company. This kind of functionality does it.
One thing I would mention that in metadata for the business, we have to remember that there's metadata associated with non-structured data as well. We have stored lots of video. We have audio clips. We have images. We have graphics. All of that content has context and it has metadata. That's the context. Where'd that image come from? Is it from our Shutterstock subscription, or did somebody just pick it up off the web and use it without permission? Is it an image that has so many pixels that we need to be aware of because, for example, Zoom won't let you use a graphic in your email announcements to Zoom that's bigger than 400 pixels? That's part of metadata as well, but that's metadata about an image rather than a structured piece of data in a table.
And Anne-Marie, what you're bringing up is big. Unstructured data is here to stay. Audio, image, natural language processing, that's here to stay. And the more metadata we have on it, the easier it is to process and use and leverage. And that's what it's all about. Great point. All right. It would be great. So I just wanted to give maybe a more classic definition. Let's suppose we have a business term. So let's assume everybody was here for our data governance talks, but I talked about business terms in detail. All a business term is a concept that we use. So in this case, our business term is contact. And you would see, we'd be able to pull up a definition that comes from a data steward for the term contact. So this is a nice classic definition, cleanly written, comes from actually a business dictionary as its source. A great way to show a definition interactive. All right. I've hit everything on business metadata that I at least have time to go into. Let's talk about technical metadata management. So first off, technical metadata helps our IT department better manage, maintain, and grow our IT systems and manage our assets. I have to say, every time I look at the top items on a CDO checklist, I never see reduce IT footprint. But I could tell you when I talk to CDOs, universally, this is one of their top 3 initiatives. Great management of technical metadata helps us reduce our IT footprint because it's totally out of control. So let me look here how we're doing on time. I need to kind of speed up a little bit, but when you look at our current systems landscape, let's kind of use an example. I'm going to show you a single process from one large company. This would be the customer process in a company that at this time was Fortune 14, client partner of ours. Look how complex it is. If you were to change anything in customer, it could have a ripple effect across hundreds, and in their case, thousands of applications. And when we look at this, we go, wow, that is so complicated. Here's the reality. Most companies don't even have the capability to have a sheet like this, where they could see how data by domain, in this case, customer, flows throughout their systems. Horribly complex. And this is why companies have so many issues with their data, why a business term differs so much between applications. All right. Some of you may be thinking, well, wait a minute. Excuse me. That, yeah, you took a Fortune 15 company, you showed customer as a process, but hey, our company's not that big. It shouldn't be that complex for us. Well, I actually think it still is. Let me give you an example. This is a mid-sized insurance company. So they're not one of these mega companies, mid-sized. We're only showing decision support. We're only showing analytics here. Is this chart any easier to read? And the answer is it isn't. This chart is horrifically difficult to read. And as you look at it, several problems, and I'm stating categorically, this is typical IT architecture in the business world. We see this over and over again. Sometimes you get a chance to meet with 4 or 5 companies in a day, and every one of them will give the same story. We have tons of duplication. Data's replicated everywhere. We don't even know where it's going. And we don't even know if we're still using it. So horribly complex. And here's a great example. This client partner, we were tasked to re-engineer all this, so I can give some statistics. Data was redundant 7-fold. Those 8 independent data marts, you basically could do all that work in 2. Once you got rid of the redundancy. Because guess what? You have one data mart that shows customer types 1, 2, 3, and another data mart that shows customer types 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You do not need a second extraction of data for that. Those are just fields on a report, filters on a report. This kind of rampant duplication prevents us from ever having a single version of the truth. Most companies don't have a single version of the truth. When I look at analytical programs for the overwhelming majority of agencies and corporations, they look like this, except vastly worse. Tons of redundancy, data redundancy, process redundancy, technology redundancy. And guess what? The biggest problem with all of it is it's wildly costly in exponential manner. And this is what great metadata management does. It helps us unwind and untangle this redundancy and streamline the organization. All right. Number one thing, when I look at technical metadata management, one of the things it does dramatically reduces the probability of project failure. When a company starts a major IT initiative, the failure rate is somewhere between 30 and 60%, depending how failure is measured and the criteria for it. Even if we take the low end of that number, 30%, imagine if planes failed 30% of the time. We would never go on an airplane. It's inexcusable to have projects failing at 30 to 60%. Even if you cut that in half, this is an engineering process. Projects should not fail. And technical metadata, the who, what, when, where, how, and why, radically reduces it. It speeds our system's time to market, reduce our system development life cycles. And guess what? We reuse our work. Typically, when companies build a new application, they do all their learning and all their manual impact analyses. They do it all over and over again from the beginning, rather than reusing their work, reusing their research. Let me show you an example of this. First off, when most companies have multiple data warehouses, when you do that, you're just asking for problems. I can think of one client partner we had where between two large data warehouses, 20, 30, 40 terabytes of size, there was 80% redundancy between them. That's bad architecture. You should not have redundancy between them. If you do, why don't you just upgrade one by 20%? It's just silly. And this is why most companies do not have one version of the truth. Everything that really has a massive impact on our companies, almost everything, are things we do at an enterprise level. That's why we need one version of the truth. All right, let me continue. Technical impact analysis, or data lineage, as it's more commonly being called today. All that is a technical metadata-driven report that helps us assess the impact of a proposed change on our IT systems. Let me show you this. So suppose we made a business decision to change the definition and format of a business term, and the business term is expense totals. Below is a very simple impact analysis that shows the downstream impacts to a change in expense totals. Very simple impact analysis. I'm going to show you several more of these, so just stay with me. Okay, how long does it typically take to do a manual impact analysis? Well, various studies show that the largest portion of a company's IT budget is spent on manual impact analysis. So we'll give you an example. We were working with a large financial institution, huge bank, and they were working with a large credit card company. Most of you have this credit card in your wallet today. The major credit card company asked the bank to change a key field. The credit card company assigned, I think it was 3 people for 4 to 6 months, and they identified 122 changes that they needed, the credit card company needed to make on their system. So 3 top-end people, 4 to 6 months. The banking company had world-class metadata management. They were able to identify 144 changes they needed to make to their systems in only 15 minutes. Why? They had built high caliber, world-class data lineage capabilities, which is same as impact analysis. They built that throughout their systems. So they can do this kind of analysis at a fraction of the time.
And cost.
Exactly. Time is money and money is money. So it impact both. So what does that first impact analysis I showed you, that first data lineage, that was a simple one. Here's a little bit more of what it looks like. So let's suppose we were tracking entity account and we were looking at it downstream. It would blow up to something more like this. Oh, and I would recommend, we did a webinar a few months ago with Octopi, a vendor in this space, and they really showed some pretty sophisticated data lineage.
Oh yeah, it was really good. So if you're interested in data lineage, please check out that webinar on our YouTube channel.
Exactly. Anne-Marie, can you put that in the chat, please? And one of the cool things about that is I was grilling their CEO as they're doing it. So that was great fun for me. So here's an example of impact analysis at a higher level, showing orders at customer orders. But let me kind of get to the next one. Lineage, up to this point, I have showed you forward lineage, data as it's moving downstream. However, there's also backward lineage, where we can look at data at a particular place, like in a data lake, and then do backward lineage to see where it came from. Forward lineage, backward lineage, very important, critical, fundamental capability, as Anne-Marie said, in any data management program. All right, let me bring this home. We have 9 more minutes and I have a few more slides. MME stands for Managed Metadata Environment, and that's the environment that's storing the metadata, both business and technical. A lot of your companies and agencies, you are involved in mergers and acquisitions. You're buying companies, you're selling companies. Anytime you're buying and selling a company, one of the key things that the big people in the executive boardrooms do is they say, hey, when we buy this company, we can consolidate all their systems. It'll save us tons of money. It'll make this purchase excellent. Here's the problem. You can't migrate those systems if you don't know the who, what, when, where, how, and why. And guess what? Redoing this, the typical way companies migrate from systems they buy is they hire about 100 to 200 consultants who just do it with a hammer and a chisel, field by field, really data element by data element, as opposed to having proper metadata management, which automates so much of this process. It automates at least your definitions of these fields. Super important. And that's what I'm showing you here. Just a report that would map the fields from a company we've purchased or own to the fields in our systems today. You have to do this if you're going to do any system consolidation. Some might say, well, David, it would take a lot of work to do this. Even though you've already built all of your business and technical metadata for big city bank, we still have to capture it to small town bank who we purchased. Newsflash, Tom Brokaw, you got to do that anyway. You have to do that analysis. If not, you will never be able to migrate off those systems. Anne-Marie, you and I, we know some companies that never migrate off those systems, and their IT departments are so bloated and weighed down that to solve those problems today, it'll cost them 5 to 10 times more than if they did it.
David, I would submit that if they at least started it now, they wouldn't have the continued total cost of ownership IT debt that they'll continue to absorb, because the explosion of data that we're getting both from internal systems and from connection to external systems is just proliferating at a rapid rate.
Anne-Marie, how do you get out of debt? Pay it off. Same thing with IT debt. You gotta pay it off. You gotta consolidate. You've got to migrate off this garbage. To exactly your point, every day that you allow the problem to continue is another day your IT budget is double and triple what it should be.
Even if it's only half again as much, that's still half you don't need to spend.
Half, 10%. You know this, a lot of companies' IT budgets are big companies are over $1 billion only for IT. That's expensive. And the cost is real. I love this. This office will not tolerate redundancy in this office. The cost of redundancy. I got Anne-Marie to roll her eyes, so I'm happy. Here's a client partner example. Large healthcare insurance company, $1.6 billion IT budget. They estimated it costs them $2 a month to store every gigabyte of data. Take that number up to $8 a month when you add in services and maintenance. They estimate 1.6 petabytes of redundant data. How much does this cost them? Simple math will tell you $153 million plus 600,000 every year, just storing and maintaining this redundant data, needlessly redundant data. So here's another client partner we had. We presented this case at a conference. I can give some details. Micron, Fortune 300 company. They had over 6,000 ETL jobs, brought in top quality metadata management software. We had discovered that 3,641 of those jobs were dormant in one way or another. We were able to reduce their ETL jobs by over 60%. Now they have less than half running. What a tremendous cost savings in complexity, in developer time, in data movement, and in hardware costs. My goodness, servers are just chugging through all this. Tremendous savings. And now they regularly check for dormant ETL jobs. Because guess what? And I'm going to kind of bring this home. We build systems to manage every aspect of our business, except systems that help us manage the systems themselves. When we talk about a managed metadata environment, it's nothing more than a system that helps us manage our systems. That's all it is. Because let me give you the final analysis. World-class metadata management programs, they are not easy to do. I show these reports, I talk about all this cool functionality. None of this happens in a month or two. It takes disciplined efforts and best practices, much like many that I've showed you today. Guess what? There are no magic bullets. If somebody says we can install some data lineage software, we could get it running in a day. Yeah, the software will run in a day, but it isn't going to integrate or manage any of your metadata in a day. It won't do it in 2 days, and it won't do it probably even in 100 days for a large company, because there are no magic bullets. You can't cut corners and do this on the cheap. You got to be smart, you got to be diligent, you got to be patient. When you do that, you will achieve amazing results. That's what this is all about. So use these best practices, incorporate it, and you'll have great results. Anne-Marie, I'm going to turn this presentation back over to you.
Well, we have a question. I've been answering a whole slew while you've been talking, and I've been throwing them in during your presentation. But here's one. What are the best practices for collecting technical metadata from ETL, reporting, visualization, and automated systems? We have hundreds of these types of systems at my company. Are data catalogs ready for the challenge?
They've never been more ready than they are today, but there's a bunch of work for doing that. I don't know I'm assuming based on your question that it seems like you're at a large kind of global 2000 company. If so, here's the deal. Certain sources of metadata, like ETL tools, we're going to be able to scan those. That won't be as difficult. However,
takes time.
Anytime an ETL tool is calling an external subroutine, that's a different matter. Now we need to be able to scan that. So we're going to need the ability to scan and bring in metadata on most likely SQL procedures, stored procedures. They also front-end and visualization tools. Most higher-end metadata management software will be able to scan those. But if you're at a big company and you've been around for a while, you're going to have some obscure stuff. You're going to have like a database system like Gupta. And heaven forbid you have Assembler, which I could think of one mega federal agency today whose core systems are all in Assembler. Those are going to be vastly more difficult to go after, but there are some ways to do it. Sometimes you will have some metadata stored on those systems in another format, and we can bring those in. But here's the trick. You need to define your business terms, because then your business terms will relate key metadata to all of your technical data elements. If we've done good business terms, it's going to make capturing metadata for the technical data elements much easier, much more valuable. I know we have a minute left, so I probably went long on that one.
That's the last question at the moment, but we are at the top of the hour. And
yep, we got to tie it up.
I would really like to conclude this by thanking David, by telling you that this will not be the only metadata management webinar that we give. We have several planned for later in the year on things like catalogs, glossaries, repositories. What's the difference? What are the advantages? What challenges do they bring? We have another webinar scheduled on more details on business metadata and the various ways to make business metadata management work in an organization, and a bunch more. But let me tell you about our next webinar. Many people are concerned about how we are using data in organizations and how organizations are using our data. Next month, Thursday, April 29th, we will have a webinar on the concepts, best practices, and implementation for data ethics. We look forward to having all of you attend. Registration is available now at the website.
Oh, Anne-Marie, can I jump in? Hey, you don't want to miss that one. Anne-Marie's always goes, I will be the host of that. I'm going to interrupt Anne-Marie every 5 seconds. I'm going to throw her the hardest questions possible on data ethics, and I'm just going to have a fun time tormenting her. You don't want to miss that. That's worth the price of admission. I'm sorry, Anne-Marie, please finish up.
But that's absolutely true. You don't want to miss it because the roles will be reversed, and
yes.
I'll have to do all the tap dancing. In fact, I've been practicing my tap dancing. As I said, the webinar slides are available on the website that was put in chat, and notice of the event will be available to all registered attendees. You'll get a thank you note. You'll also get the certificate if you stayed for the whole presentation. If you're still here, you're stayed. Wait about a week to 10 days, you'll get it, we promise. Last but not least, I want to mention the fact that datamanagementu.com has hundreds of articles on metadata management, on data governance, on data privacy, on document management, on a whole slew of topics. And if you're interested in studying a course on metadata management, we have one available at datamanagementeducation.com. Go there, check it out, and I'm sure you'll find that it's really valuable. It's David teaching metadata management. Thank you all for attending, and I look forward to seeing you at our next session.